All right, thanks everyone. So good evening, my name is Sam Ng. I run engineering at GoDaddy. We work on the domains platforms teams. Today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about this little thing called IoT. You guys should all know about it by now. We're going to talk about how we can turn the data that is generated from IoT into meaningful, impactful insight for our GoDaddy customers. So a bit of a recap, GoDaddy's vision, for those of you who don't know it, is to radically shift the global economy towards small businesses by empowering people to easily start, confidently grow, and successfully run their own ventures. Okay, so that's a mouthful, but basically what we do is we build technology to make people able to start their businesses and be able to do them better. So when we talk about IoT and what GoDaddy would do in this space, the natural question is, how does that relate with our small business customers? How does that relate for the set of folks that we want to be targeting? Right? One of the things that you guys will have heard is that, in 2020, the expectation is that IoT devices, and they use a very loose term, IoT devices, as something that has a sensor as well as an internet connection. IoT devices will generate on the order of 1.5 zettabytes worth of data in a single year. For those of you who don't know what a zettabyte is, I didn't know either, so I had to look it up. It is 1 trillion gigabytes. To give you a comparison, the internet in its entirety today is estimated, and so this is all the movies that you can think of, all the songs and MP3s and images and all the utilities that we have. The entirety of the internet is estimated to be at about 0.5 zettabytes, and so the expectation is that in a couple of years, IoT devices in a single year alone will generate more data than the entirety of our internet today. So how do we make that meaningful for small business, right? Data is noise. How do we turn that noise into signal? Well, the first thing we did was we decided we would build a prototype. We actually partnered with the MIT Media Lab to put together a prototype of a small IoT device of our own, and we would try to go and see how we can go and make our small business customers' lives a little bit better by giving them access to data, access to analytics, access to business intelligence about their physical space. So partnering with the MIT Media Lab meant two things. One, we got to use their super cool 3D printer to print our cases. And two, we got to, there's a slide missing there. Weird. We got to get free labor, right? We got a bunch of MIT students to go around and put these things up on lampposts in the downtown crossing area in Boston. Now, what this map is basically a photo of the area. All the little red dots are lampposts. The red dots with circles are where we put our little sensors. And on the bottom right, you'll see that leads to a T-stop. But basically what we would do is we'd set these guys up to get data about the physical space in a small business neighborhood. Two types of data that we got. The first is what I'm going to call object flow detection, object flow data. Basically, this is the ability to look through a camera and see where objects are and track where they're going. So on the left, you'll see the actual image that our camera saw, right? And then can detect objects like people walking across the street, cars, cyclists, that type of thing. And on the right is a visualized format of the data that our cameras send back, which is where objects are kind of moving. So that's object flow detection. And the second is what we're calling a time-based heat map of where the objects are. So that one's a little bit more self-explanatory. You see on the left, we've got a dude standing talking on his cell phone, and so he's kind of pacing there apparently. So over all 4 of the time-lapse photos, you can see that his little blob is kind of there walking around. So that's 2 types of data that we can generate. But at the beginning, I said that our goal was to turn data into insight for our small business customers. So what could we do with that? This is Henry. Henry runs a burrito shop in the downtown crossing area, and by providing him foot traffic analysis of his surrounding neighborhood, we were able to help him do a couple of things, right? First, by giving him an idea of where the objects were flowing, we were able to help him figure out, like, hey, where are my customers coming from? Are they coming from other stores down the street? Are they coming from the T-stop? Are they coming from cars? Where do they come from? So you can kind of get an idea of what it is that, that context of that customer, and especially over, time of day, that gives him some insights about that. Next, he could say, hey, I've got a new sign. I'm going to stick my sign outside my door, outside my store, and I'm going to be able to see, based on our heat map from this week, whether or not people were standing and looking at my sign versus, last week when I didn't have that sign there, right? And so he could then see, like, the effectiveness of that sign. Were people standing and stopping and noticing his sign? And then combined with that object flow data, were they then coming into a store, or were they kind of looking at a sign and kind of moving on, right? So this is a very small example of something that we think you can do with IoT data that can kind of drive insight and drive impact for our small business customers. Hopefully you can see that with a little bit of imagination, with some data filtering, some data mining, we're able to transform these smart connected devices into devices that can provide insight and impact for people and for our customers as well. And I'm done. Questions?
This is not what GoDaddy used to do, so why did you head in this direction?
Great question. So I'll try to give a very short answer. So GoDaddy has a couple of unique assets to it. I'll name two of them. There's probably three. One is domains and one is DNS. We're the largest domain registrar and one of the largest DNS providers. But if you squint at them and don't think of domains and DNS and you start thinking of identity and addressability, then you start seeing how this can make a little bit more sense, right? When we talk about your digital identity as a small business being the encompassing set of things, not just your domain and your website, but maybe your, your metadata about you, your LinkedIn profile, your physical devices connected to your store. When we think about connectivity, addressability, not just as your DNS resolution to your website, but as the ability to connect to your devices, the ability to connect to the devices around your neighborhood, then you can start seeing a little bit more of how why GoDaddy wants to enter into this space. So small businesses are where we kind of start. Our belief is that technology trends typically flow two ways, right? One, they flow from the consumer into the business space, and so you'll see things like iPhones and iPads, right? Those were very popular before, and now they're making their way into IT. And the other way is the reverse, right? Where they flow from large-scale enterprises down to individual users. Our goal is to start with a small business customer, because that's what GoDaddy is good at doing, and then kind of see where that takes us. Good questions. That GoDaddy has participated in, or just things in general? So all sorts of things when you talk about scanning software, retail scanners, for example, right? These are things that, for example, the Nordstroms and the Walmarts and the Whole Foods of the world, they have things that, you set up a new sign that says, hey, avocados for $1 or whatever, and they've got, cameras that'll go and detect whether or not people are actually attracted to that sign, right? That's starting to flow down into small businesses by, folks like Nest and the other kind of webcam type people providing you that type of image processing and that type of analytics. Yeah.
How do you balance kind of privacy versus insight?
Yeah. Great question. So this is constantly a very, very hot topic with IoT. What we ended up doing here was we made it sure that our cameras and our little devices, I could show you. They were really small devices, and they're really cheap, right? There's just a Raspberry Pi board, a very cheap, I think it was like a $3 camera and a transmitter. And so these guys are not very, very powerful. And so we did a bunch of image processing on the devices themselves, and then only sent back the anonymized location data. And so we would only get back data about about what the camera is seeing, not the actual stream itself. That is a great question. The very short answer is yes, we've given it a lot of thought. The long answer is, we're not sure what that's going to look like yet, right? Like right now, we're very much in our ideation phase of figuring out what we can build and what makes sense for people. Like, how do we actually solve a problem that you have? Figuring out how to monetize that and figuring out how to sell that is a marketing and salesperson problem. So I will leave it up to them because they are much better versed in that than I am. Anyone else? Cool. Thanks, everyone.